Hello, everyone, and welcome to this installment of Film Forward's Inclusive Leadership Conversations. I want to welcome Darcy from the Sign Language Company, who's here today to help us make this event more accessible. I'm Emily Best, founder and CEO. I feel like that's maybe important information if you've never joined us before. We started this series because we launched an inclusive leadership curriculum at Film Forward built around the 6 C's: cognizance, curiosity, courage, commitment, cultural intelligence, and collaboration. And we found that this was an incredible vector through which to ask questions of some of the most interesting and exciting leaders we get to meet. And that might actually be helpful for our community of folks who are looking to build more equitable, sustainable, and innovative organizations. And today, I could not be more excited. I have known Jen Fox, who is the Director of People Experience and Culture at JustWorks, for quite some time. And I've worked with her as a client. We have collaborated, we have commiserated, and I'm really excited for her to talk to us today about commitment. So Jen Fox, welcome to the stage and screen, as it were. There she is.
Hi.
Hi, how are you today?
I am great, and seeing you and knowing that we're going to have this conversation has been something I've looked forward to all day, because I know our conversations can go in all kinds of directions. And so I'm just excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being here. So we like to start very simple, pitch you a softball. Just tell us about your own journey to leadership.
Is that a softball? My journey, actually, I was just sharing this story with one of my own team members, was very much a trial, just like immersive. I was working in retail. You had to be 18 to be a people manager. I walked in on my 18th birthday and they were like, congratulations, you are now the store manager. And my first assignment was to let go of all the staff and hire my own. Let's be clear, I had no business doing any of this, but in hindsight, it's set the stage for pretty much the rest of my career, which was like be thrown in or dive in head first and then kind of figure it out.
That's like one of the most incredible examples of the corporate cruelty to middle management.
Yeah, and I think too, being 18, it was not only, it was kind of like you're just like now legal to, have the key to the establishment, and now, being responsible for all the things that went along with it. But, obviously, the rest of my career was really like that. It's just been learning on the go, failing and getting back up again, and kind of figuring out. When I look at the common thread, it's that, but then it's also sort of figuring out what works and sort of creating my own sort of style, kind of along the way.
So we're here today to talk about commitment, and I'm going to start general, and then I'm going to zoom in because I know some stuff. I have some background of just what role commitment has played in your leadership journey.
So it's so interesting when you sent me this as a topic, I noticed right away that I sort of had a reaction to the word. I was like, why am I so sort of activated by the word commitment? And I think that I started to think about what does commitment meant, sort of not just in the context of leadership, but my life overall. And I think starting with, my own upbringing, commitment was very much like, you said you would do this, come hell or high water, you're going to do it. And so I noticed myself that I've got this like weight on this word commitment, that it's like, no matter what happens, you're going to see it through. And I mean, as a parent now, right, this is something that I'm keenly aware of, right? Like, you said you were going to be on the team and get out there.
Yeah.
So when I think about in the context of leadership, how it's shown up, which I'd never really thought about before, it doesn't have that heaviness. It has more of like a like fluidity to it. And thinking about when I go back and think about my various, not only just leadership but sort of the different approaches to leadership that I think I've taken. It's like constantly assessing, like, what am I committed to now and now and now, without that, like, I once was committed to that, and so therefore I need to see it through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even to the conversation we were having, 20 minutes ago. So I do think that does play a role in my leadership, because, I've been fortunate to work for, high growth, fast paced companies. And the things that, aside from sort of like core values and missions, those things that don't change too much, the things I need to be committed to, sometimes those change day to day, right? Priorities shift. And so I think I've developed the ability to be equally committed to something, that's like new on my radar, as maybe some of those like really sort of deeper things. So I guess that's the thing. It's sort of ever changing now, which was definitely not what commitment was, in my opinion.
That's really interesting. So I want to zoom in on a particular slice of some commitment I know you have really kept to, and just talk about like what that means in light of leadership. So you were JustWorks, and you specifically were one of the very first clients we had in Film Forward in 2020, and our like flagship, we had an intensive curriculum for racial justice. For all these companies trying to figure out what do we need to do, what's actually going on, how are our employees actually feeling. And JustWorks was one of the companies that made some really public statements and then seems to have like followed through on them. And that's fascinating in light of the fact that today the news was that there are now lawsuits against companies who had made public pledges and failed to deliver on them, which, what goes around comes around, my friends. But what's been fascinating to me is like you all together with leadership set out a pretty audacious strategy. But I imagine that as like back then you were what, 400 people, now you're 1,200?
Yep.
I would imagine that what that commitment looks like has changed and shifted. So I'm really interested between the relationship between like a commitment to an idea or a principle and then the delivery.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that I'm most proud of the work that we do. I think, I mean, there's our certainly our commitments made in 2020, but even well before that, our core values and our mission and just sort of how we operate and what we stand for as a company. When I think back to that time in that sort of early partnership and the work that Seed and Spark enabled us to do, I mean, it was profound and impactful and really everlasting in so many ways. Just actually watching your trailer and seeing some of the clips from some of those films, like, it was so good. So, how does it, so what hasn't changed is the commitment to, an inclusive environment. What hasn't changed is our willingness to take a stand. As we've grown, as you've said, I mean, you've got our numbers about right from when we worked together before, and thinking about like, how does that scale, right? Like, how do we keep those commitments and those things that, especially at the time, I mean, in 2020, right? It was just all the things going on at the same time. How do we keep that same, emotional engagement to this work, over time? Because, the news cycle, as we know, they're short. Right, everything just goes in and out, in and out, and so there, even though the news unfortunately continues to happen, that core commitment is there. It has been there the whole time. We have continued to invest. We now have an amazing DEIB team who now is like driving, this work and having us be more strategic, because it's not, the black box on Instagram. Like that's never been our approach. And then, I think along with that, though, is it's recognizing that, to keep it alive, we have to continue to meet our people where they are. We have to continue to expand our own view of what commitment and inclusivity looks like, and recognize where we fall short as well. So yeah, it's just, it's this, the work will never be done, but I'm extremely proud of the path that we've, at least that we've been on in the time that I've been here.
Do you think the like public facing commitments and the public accountability that JustWorks engaged in has been useful for keeping up that internal sort of emotional energy? Because like you say emotional energy, and I immediately think burnout, because we're seeing it across organizations all across the country, right? And burnout in part because the people tasked with the hard work of equity are often grotesquely under-resourced, and therefore, sort of left to just use the hours and their own time and body to try to do things. So yeah, I'd be curious, do you feel like that sort of public accountability was useful?
So this is my, opinion of one. I don't actually think that drove it. I mean, because we weren't, the commitments themselves weren't motivated from a look what we're doing. That was never the motivation. So therefore the follow up and the accountability, I mean, to the point that a lot of the accountability and the follow up was only ever communicated internally. I mean, some of that, we shared like a 12-month follow up on here. These were our commitments and here's where we're at. Yeah. So no, I don't think, because it wasn't our motivation to be like, look what we're, look what we're doing. And yet I think that some people probably need that accountability in terms of like, well, we said it, it's out there, so now we better follow through. But again, that goes back to what I was saying about sort of my childhood. It's that sort of, if that's the motivation, is that actually going to yield the result? I don't know. So I don't actually think that was like a driving thing for us. I would be curious to ask that question of my colleagues.
I'm sort of delighted to hear you say that. I mean, I think it very much echoes what's happening in the space now of all these people who made commitments, didn't do anything about it. That actually, to understand what those core drivers are, you hearken back to existing cultural values that were always the heartbeat of the company. And I do think that sort of core value piece is so crucial, because so when I think about core values, the way that I describe them is, what are the values we're committed to and from which we will not depart?
Yep.
So those are the things that you say that you absolutely, like baby Jen is like, yeah, no, I'm not backing down from this commitment. I can be absolutely held to seeing through on those things, because I think it's such a useful decision-making and trade-off making rubric for teams, right? To be able to say, well, which of these 5 things that we could choose from actually best conforms to our values? It's a really helpful way to advance the work.
Yeah. Well, and I had a really impactful experience actually when I was working at the Starbucks corporate office, and it was I led our orientation program there, and we had one of our sort of cultural icons come in and do this exercise where it was using their 7 sort of principles. And we did this exercise around really understanding and experiencing the tensions between them, because, they all sound great when you list them on the, sort of the plaque on the wall in the office. Yeah. But that's not the reality of how they're practiced on a day-to-day basis. Cause like often one is at the expense of the other. And so from decision-making perspective, there's trade-offs. And so one of our core values is openness, for example. And so when you think about openness and what that means, sometimes that comes, at the expense of something else. And so, I think it's interesting to always be thinking about core values as like sort of the guardrails and those like immovable things, but also recognizing that there's inherent tension in them.
I love that. I think that dynamic tension to me is actually what is at the core of leadership, which is to say, if you're a leader at the end of the day, it's probably your call to decide which direction we go, and how you get stakeholder buy-in, how you build context for the trade-off you will inevitably have to make so that people understand why this, not that, is like, that to me is the job at the end of the day. It's super interesting. So tell me more about some mistakes you've made along the way and what you learned from them. Do you have any favorite sort of mythic examples from your career at this point?
I mean, this is like question 3. It's like buried in here as though I'm just going to go like, oh, there was this one time. I mean, this could take up our entire conversation. Oh my gosh. So I was thinking about what mistake would be sort of in service of this work and sort of highlighting my own journey, and something that resonates because it's one of those, sort of core things. It's like hardwired. So one of my strongest characteristics is my ability to get stuff done early on, my hashtag was hashtag GSD, just, get it done. And it's been part of my brand, and I love that part of myself. And the downside of that, or sort of the back of the hand, is my drive toward that, my bias to action, as people say when they're trying to like make me sound, to be nice about it, versus like saying you're bulldozing over people, is that my ability to like move forward and make quick decisions, and my high risk tolerance can be to leave other people like going, whoa, like what's, kind of what's going on. So I can't like isolate a mistake. I can say I can like identify that as like an ongoing learning. To like an hour ago, that is something that I'm constantly, thinking about like taking those things and like harnessing my strengths, because they really are. Yep. But also being mindful enough of them to understand the impact on other people. Where do I need to leverage those? Sometimes that does need to be in the driver's seat, but also just to have that awareness and humility around, the impact on other people, and be really intentional about reaching out, bringing people along, soliciting other, points of view. So that's my ongoing and ever-present mistake.
It's also why, more or less, as soon as we met, we were like, yes, I see you.
You're my people.
This is precisely my journey as a leader also, is to be biased towards action while not bulldozing. Yeah. And if making quick decisions has been a protective factor in your life, or a success-making factor in your life, it's very, very hard to deprogram. Yeah. I think that's sort of like one of those core challenges of implicit bias, is like some of the biases that you have because they're self-protecting. Right? Like making quick decisions for me, my bias towards action, and my sort of intolerance of like lulling around in like, what, like, oh, we have to keep talking about this, like that, that protected me in a lot of ways, especially early in my career, from like really unhealthy situations.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
But now that I'm the leader, I'm creating the unhealthy situation. And it's a very humbling thing to learn. And I think that's a piece of unpacking implicit bias that sometimes goes unrecognized, is that some of these biases we hold on to really hard because they helped us.
Yeah.
Part of what we have to learn in practice is like, what happens if we don't hold on to them? Lots of other cool things happen. Lots more ideas come in.
Yeah. Well, and recognizing those, like where those sort of hardwired things, serve us. And I did a lot of, sort of personal growth work sort of in my late 20s. And I sort of created some shortcuts for myself, because what it was is that I would like, often when an opportunity came up, I would often be like a no, or I can't do that, or whatever. And that it came from a core sort of characteristic that I was quite cautious, actually, in my upbringing. But once I was able to recognize that and see the limits on that, then I could stop and go, oh, I just said that. Wait, is that my like 3-year-old self talking, or is this my like current day self? And so it's kind of the same thing, right? Of recognizing that. Where am I moving ahead because I don't want the feedback, because that would like make me vulnerable or potentially slow me down? Or where is it actually useful that I'm willing to move forward and take the risks that are required in this situation? So it's a constant work in progress.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, so the thing that strikes me as you're talking about commitment is also this kind of bouncing between various needs and changing landscape is really this core competency of resilience, right? If you're going to stay committed to an idea, but everything is changing underneath it, like how do you stay resilient? Do you have sort of advice for other leaders on how to maintain or I don't know, constitute resilience?
Oh my gosh. This is the only way I can sum it up, is what I tell myself is I have 100% track record of getting through all the challenges to this point.
Wow.
And I mean, when I think back to the last 3 years, it's almost hard for me to think about. I mean, there was like, there was COVID and all the things that happened. Yeah. It was virtual schooling 3 children. with a demanding career, moving out of a like family home that had been the family for 50 years. I mean, it's kind of my style, right? Just like rip the Band-Aid and do it all at once. And when I think about getting through that, part of it is I don't even know if we've fully processed all of it. I don't know if any of us have, having lived through it all. But yeah, I think that the resilience, is there like a tip? It's like, oh, all the things and the self-care and all the stuff like that. But I think it's just, I have this core belief in myself because I've overcome a lot of challenges. I've taken a lot of, very random, road less traveled routes in my life. And that's where I just have this core belief that I've gotten through everything before, everything I didn't see coming, and I will get through the next thing. And so some of that I think also gives me then sort of a comfort that I don't need to always try to anticipate. I'm also a control freak. I don't need to constantly try to anticipate what the next thing is. I can just have a trust that whatever it is, I will be able to like get through it and bounce back and honestly be better for it. Because when you look back, you can go, oh, I'm so glad that thing happened in that way, because here's what I learned from it, or how I grew from it. So yeah, just whatever little reminder people need to tell themselves to remind them that if you're still here, you're still here.
I love that so much. I'm still here. I live in a place where there's a lot of birds, and I go out in the morning and they're all chirping at each other. And I really believe that that's all of them waking up in the morning being like, I'm still here. Are you here? Everybody's here. And that's actually a really important, like, resilience is also relational, right? I'm here and you're here. We're still here. Yeah. I think hope is also relational. That sort of like forward thinking, inspiration, like it's actually relational. And we don't always have it ourselves on the day of, but we pull it from the people around us, and those reminders that like, if they're still here, I can still be here. I'm still
here. Totally. Well, I'm thinking about those things, like those formative experiences that you've been through with other people, whether it's that colleague or that relationship or that friend or whatever, like when you're down in it with someone, right? And you can come through that together. And then also I think on the resilience side, I guess the other thing that comes to mind is like just having the vulnerability when you're not 100% to like allow other people to lean in and pick up some of the weight. Again, not a strength of mine. I'm kind of a do it all, kind of person, but I'm learning to be more supportable, learning to be okay with where I can say like, look, I'm not 100% right now. And I'm so grateful for, the role I have, the team I have, the company I work for, that, I've had a lot of things over even the last couple of weeks where I've had to sort of, kind of check out. So in order to be resilient, I think there's also like a huge privilege that I have, that I even have the space to be able to like take care of myself or tap out for a little bit in order to be able to bounce back. And I know that's not the case for everybody.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I would be curious to know, because you've been at JustWorks now for
3.5 years. Yeah.
So what changes? When you're like a fresh new leader jumping into a fast growth company, that's one thing, but now you've got some tenure. You're in that big fancy office on the west side. Where did we meet?
Yeah, downtown.
Yeah, in the cool like financial district space with the food across the street. That place.
Food everywhere. Let's
food so good. But yeah, what changes the longer you are leading inside an organization?
What's funny, and this might not be what you're expecting. I feel like the longer you're with them, the more, in some ways, irrelevant I become. And let me tell you why. I'm really present to it right now in having built my team. That, when I was first here, I mean, it was like, myself and Danielle, we were like two people kind of doing all the things. So I was the face of anything to do with culture or development or all that. It was us. That was it. I knew a lot of people. Everybody knew my face. And then now, having built this team of just incredible professionals who are out kind of doing all of that work, they're the ones that are known. They're the ones that are driving it. They're I'm the support system behind that. And so when I think about, my role as a leader, sometimes it's out there and it's being the spokesperson, or it's the managing up or writing the memos, or, sort of doing the stakeholder management. Certainly in terms of where I'm at in my career, I get opportunities like this to be able to, speak out and sort of have that external presence. But really, I think my role internally is to just build and bolster the people who, are that I'm so lucky to work with and have let them shine and let them have their time. So sometimes I'm like, no one knows me anymore. I feel irrelevant. But I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, it certainly speaks to great management and great leadership of, I think you should effectively lead yourself out of a job to the extent that's possible. And also the role then becomes like, what do I unblock for you?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And that becomes a much greater part of the role, which I think is also kind of a fun new thing, a fun new skill to learn. What do you think is the most important tenet of inclusive leadership?
Humility.
Mm.
I mean, as I said, I could list last week, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I mean, just constantly on my own learning journey around being an inclusive leader, what that looks like at all different levels. You know, it's like when you're playing, I always like in my sort of work as a career coach, I always sort of equate everything to a game. Like, what game are you playing? When you're playing a small game, the stakes are low and you can screw up and nobody like really knows. And the bigger the game you play, you know, so if I'm looking to impact work now at the level of an organization or in my personal life, you know, at my community, the bigger the game, the bigger the opportunity to screw it up. And so I think the humility to recognize where I fall short, the ability to continue to just like get back on the path, to avoid the shame spiral that comes in when when I mess up. So yeah, I think if it's one thing, it's humility, recognizing the work around inclusivity will never be done. And I'm so grateful for the grace and the partnership and everything that I have from so many people to continue to like support me on my own learning journey that then I can go on to impact, at those other levels.
So a miracle thing has happened in every single one of these sessions, which is that every single one of our guests has given us a like stick the landing statement with 1 minute left to go, and you have given us no exception. It has been totally incredible that every single time it goes just like this. Jen, thank you so much. I think leaving us on this note of humility, and it's something we're hearing repeated a lot throughout this session, and I hope that some of our regular listeners will start to really take this away, that all of these leaders that we're talking to really cite humility as one of these really core tenets of inclusive leadership. Thank you so much for your time. So grateful that you could be here. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. And again, to Darcy and the Sign Language Company for helping us to make these sessions more inclusive. We will be hosting more interviews, so keep an eye out on our LinkedIn and RSVP for our upcoming events. You can also watch all of our previous events on our YouTube channel, and they're also posted on Film Forward's LinkedIn page. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.